My business name is Kate Miller Sustainable Interiors. I do lighting design and sustainability consulting. What I'm working on these days is a very interesting project for a nonprofit called Quad Inc. They are a facility in Portland, a nonprofit that helps people with mobility, and these are all people who are handicapped, and their goal is to be as independent and live as normal a life as possible. And so I'm going to be working with the director of that organization to go through all their facilities and bring them up to speed with weatherization and particularly lighting, which is an area of passion for me. Well, I have been in this industry. I started in college, a passion for solar and curiosity, and I went around New Mexico looking at the early solar houses that people had built. And I wanted very much to see our culture move towards sustainability. At various jobs I've had, I worked for the National Center for Appropriate Technology as a field rep, Washington State Energy Extension Service, and really what I've found is that things are coming full circle. We have now, we call it sustainability. Before maybe it was called appropriate technology, but the idea is to use your local materials. And my original inspiration for getting into this whole area of I guess you'd say buildings that are responsive to the human needs was very primitive architecture from around the world, what would be called indigenous architecture in the Ivory Coast and the different parts of the Northwest fascinated me. And I moved out to the Northwest partially because of my desire to be part of more of a natural environment. So I've lived here since the mid-70s, and I see that we are really challenged. We have the reputation of being very green in Oregon, and yet the epicenter of this green movement is very small, and unless we start right now moving towards working with all the existing buildings and the lifestyles of people, we won't really accomplish what we need to do. But I see that there's opportunities. I have met some very interesting people in the past month. I was visiting Hawaii recently, and I met people there that were doing a social networking site. They have a very interesting combination of taking a personal action pledge and being the change in whatever way a person chooses, whether it's eating more local food or using public transportation more or bicycling or perhaps doing something particular with building energy use, which consumes about 40 to 50% of our energy. But what I see is we all as a society have to learn how to work collaboratively. So that's my big thing, is I like to work collaboratively and plan projects in a team environment that is interactive. One of the issues in our society now is that people have gotten specialized and over-specialized, and we need to start building common agendas, mutual goals, and speaking with one voice towards achieving some of these goals that are complicated and not letting all the barriers and all the distractions deter us from achieving some of these bigger, broader goals. When I was in Portland in the 80s, I was a project manager at Bonneville Power, and I supervised a project that I was luckily able to take charge of. I did the project planning, and I visited California and Washington to see what was going on. It was all aimed at the new commercial buildings, and we had not done anything like that in the Northwest. This was formed because the Northwest Power Planning Council said, well, you know, you have tried to build 5 nuclear power plants here, and it's not clear the region needs them, has the power, or certainly the money to pay for them. So the Northwest had really gotten into some bad juju with it, like Enron, except perhaps worse. And this formed the Power Planning Council that was looking at ways to create energy efficiency as a resource. Well, what does that mean? How do you do that? How do you measure something that's not being used? And so what we had to do was start a process of dialogue. And I, as I said, went to California Energy Commission, sat in on some of their early Title 24 meetings, and quickly realized that everybody was a little bit confused by what a new commercial building energy use even was, and that the codes themselves didn't really handle energy as much. They were more oriented towards building and life safety, and which of course is where it should be. The priorities have to be on people. So this was a long time ago, and it was very exciting. We got, despite the bad economy, despite the fact that there was very little to go on, I coordinated a national Delphi process where we looked at all the new technologies. We had a peer review of people who were considered industry experts that would talk about, at that point we were concerned that people wouldn't specify better lighting or better high efficiency cooling systems or use lighting controls, for instance, because nobody had used them before, and people are very, very skeptical about technology, and they don't want callbacks. So the Delphi process, all that did was in some ways create some trust that, yes, if you put in these products, they would at least last 5 or 10 years or some sort of reasonable period. And then the other big epiphany of this project was to get dialogue earlier on. In the very early stage of a project, you can find all kinds of ways to save money and save energy without any extra cost at all. So here we are today. We've got the exact same agenda, but it's for the existing buildings. So my challenge is to anybody in the 2020 architecture or LEED or building energy sustainable advisor programs all over the country, please, let's work together and let's make this the year of social equity. We've had the equity piece of the sustainability really be shortchanged. We have focused very much on some beautiful, beautiful buildings, and we were just in a lovely building last night that was great. I don't mean to sound negative about them, but we've worked so hard in the sector that has now stopped for all intents and purposes temporarily. Let's all take a challenge and look at adopting a building. If it's a neighbor that's a senior, if it's a school, if it's assisted living, there's buildings out there that are energy hogs, and the people that are in them can benefit from many of the incentives. So I'm right now, my next initiative is creating lighting specs and green specs that can be rolled out with electricians around the country and create jobs in communities. I'm working with the people that want to cooperate on this, great. If you're interested, let me know. I'm very much a team player. I try to focus on the Northwest region, but really connect to the California market because it's such a big part of the industry.